Hello, everybody. Almost like you anticipated me coming up. It went quiet. Thank you all for coming. Welcome to the Game Dev Group. It's a much bigger audience than I was expecting tonight, so thanks all for coming. Yeah, it's awesome. So, loads of new faces in the crowd, which is always amazing. So, just as a quick sort of intro to who we are, what we do, kind of distilled it into these 4 words. So, we're just like a welcoming community of game devs who meet, learn, collaborate, and say hello to each other. So yeah, just trying to build the sort of friendliest, most welcoming group of passionate people in the industry, in the UK, in the world, in the universe. We'll get there. So I like to start these things by just saying a massive thank you to everyone involved. So thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you to our speakers, past and present. So I always say, but this wouldn't exist in the form that it does exist without the generosity of people giving their time to come and give us talks and share their knowledge. So thank you to speakers past and present and future. Thank you to the incredible Mill Street who give us the space and generously let us come and fill it up and just have a good time and look after us and get all the chairs out when we've got more people than we thought we would. Yeah, so speak to Bevs, speak to the team if you're interested in like a home here, because it is a phenomenal place to be, and they're a phenomenal team. So we're also looking for other partners as well. So if anyone in the audience knows of anyone who might like to partner with the Game Dev Group, then give me a shout afterwards. That'd be wonderful. And I'll say thank you to you as well after, once we get that set up. Big thank you to Reese and to Anthony as well, who do the AV for us. They are phenomenal, and again, we've got like a live stream going, and that'll be up for posterity. So if you have people who sort of missed it and wanted to come along, then that'll be up on YouTube as well. So thank you to those guys for providing that. Quick update on what we're doing as a community. So we now do games nights every month. So we've been doing that for the last 2 months, 3 months, and they're just really good fun. It's slightly more informal than this. I mean, this is pretty informal as well, but even more so where people just bring their own games, like games consoles as well, Switches, Segas, Nintendos, whatever it is, board games as well, card games, Uno. So come along. The next one is on the 16th of October, so it's always good. You just seen you don't have one. You don't have time. Oh, oh no. Okay, so for anyone else who is around, it's yeah, the 16th of October. So if you're here through Meetup, you will get an email that sort of says afterwards, how did you find the Game Dev Group? If you have a good time and you want to give us 5 stars, that'd be wonderful. If you don't have a good time and you want to give us 1 star, that's absolutely fine too. I won't take it personally. I'm hoping you have a good time. If you have a really, really great time and you want to share all about it on social media, hashtag the GDG, that would be wonderful, because we're just trying to build the biggest, most useful, most knowledgeable resource for the game dev community in Leamington and the world, the universe, etc. So yeah, share it far and wide, and that really helps us build an audience. So you haven't come to listen to me speak, you've come to listen to our speaker. I say speaker because unfortunately, we did have an artist on board this evening, but they couldn't get their talk through approval process on time. So unfortunately, we don't have them talking tonight, but we will do in the future. We'll get it booked in, and we did have cover as well, but that couldn't get through the approval process in time either. So, so unfortunately, we don't have an artist speaking tonight, but it does mean that we get to listen to them at some point in the future, which I'm really looking forward to. And it also means that we get a little bit of extra time tonight to get downstairs, have a drink, and network and mingle and have good fun. So, yeah, I will leave it up to Scott, who is the tools engineer at Playground Games, to give us a talk on working smarter with tools. Thank you, Scott. Could we all give him a welcoming round of applause, please?
No transitions. Let's stand here. Awesome. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about how you can work smarter with tools. This talk is about how you can work more effectively with tools, because more effective tools help you to make a more effective workflow for making more effective, help you make a more effective workflow for making games. So today, firstly, I'm going to more formally introduce myself, but then introduce you to the teams that are going to be able to help you to deliver tools in a AAA environment. And then I'm going to go through the workflow of how you might be able to produce tools and the skills you might need to be able to produce tools in a AAA environment, and how those tools make you more effective at creating games in that environment. But I also believe that tools are not just for the AAA. Tools are also for the independent and for the solo developer. So I'm going through the exact same process, but in independent work. And then finally, I'm just going to end off on how you might want to make better interfaces for your artists and designers. So first things first, let me more formally introduce myself. My name is Scott Foster. I graduated Staffordshire University with a degree in computer games development. And I work at Playground Games. I help develop Forza Horizon 5 and the DLC Rally Adventure. Now, who are the tools, systems, and build teams? These are the teams that help you to produce and deliver tools in a AAA environment. Now, the tools team, I personally work on the tools team, and tools in this instance are any piece of software that help a content creator to put something into the actual game. For us, they are custom-made pieces of software. They are user-friendly pieces of software that help a content creator to put their creative and artistic decisions into that end product. Now, what is a system if that is a tool? A system will sit alongside the game and will assist and will help those tools work. So a system might be, I don't know, a caching system or a building system. So they might be able to develop a piece of software that will identify some piece of data that might be better off built into a build server and maybe better off being built over there and then supplied to that user. Another thing that the systems team help us with is how data is loaded on the runtime. So if you imagine, well, an easy way of thinking about this is if you're driving really fast in Forza Horizon and you see all the textures and all the models loading in, all that streaming tech, that is something that the systems team will help us develop. There's a lot of overlap between tools and systems, but I also mentioned build there. So the build team, they will also help us to set up those build servers, and these are powerful build servers that help us deliver our tools, and also again, but for this talk, our tools to our larger teams. Also, when I talk about code tests later on, our code tests run automatically on those build servers to help us keep our stability high and our aggression low. So let's talk about those tools. And for this here, I'm going to talk about tools in Forza Horizon 5, and we're going to go through a process of developing tools in Forza Horizon 5. So how are tools actually made in a AAA game? Well, a creator generally will have something they will want to do, some piece of data they'll want to put into the actual game. They'll have something they'll want to actually, some artistic data they'll want to actually add into the actual game, but it might not be in the right format, or they want to add it into the actual game, but it might not necessarily be, it might not actually be ready for the actual end product. So there'll be a piece of software in the middle, meaning they'll have a tools need for that actual end product. And they'll approach us, and we'll work out what that actually is. Now, this is not always content creator driven, so we understand what our content creators actually do. And one of the ways we do that is using shadow sessions, which means we'll sit down with the content creators. And this is not just from a software engineering point of view, but also from a UX point of view. So sometimes we will improve our tools from things that are easy from our point of view as well. Wherever that starts off, though, we will then start writing a plan. And that will contain things like estimates, maybe might look a bit of code. Most importantly, we'll start contacting like UX and leads and stakeholders. One of the main reasons why we contact stakeholders is that we want them, well, when I say stakeholders, I mean also the people that are going to be testing this. And the reason being, we want them to be able to test it along the way. And we want this team to sit outside that time to be able to test it along the way. And we want our peers involved along the way as well to be able to scrutinize our code and make sure our plans make sense. The communication does not stop after the end of the plan, so we keep that communication all the way through for that reason. When we develop as well, we use test-driven development, and we use QA testing. I'll talk more on testing later. It's a bit easier to imagine how tools work with an actual concrete example. This is that concrete example. So this is a I helped develop during the course of Forza Horizon 5. Now, our artists, during the course of the game, they wanted a workflow where they could sit down with their artist leads and they could review their assets with their artist leads with as little friction as they possibly could. So if you imagine that they were working on, I don't know, jungle assets, they didn't want to both literally and figuratively hunt around the jungles of Mexico looking for those assets. What they wanted to do instead is they wanted to go to an area of the world and there'd be a grid of assets to find them. This sounds reasonable. It was reasonable, and it was so reasonable that during the course of Forza Horizon 4, this was actually implemented using an engineering script. So they'd contact an engineer and they would place them down. It's okay, but there's a slight issue with that implementation in that the assets that are placed are assets like anything else, meaning they have to be maintained. So you have to manually remove them. If the collections are ever mixed together, you have to actually unmix them, and we could do better. We knew we could do better, so we made a plan, and we started to develop. Whenever we develop tools, we do something called test-driven development. This is code to test our code. Now, test-driven development helps us keep our stability high and our regression low. It means the promises that I make to my code are not just promises that are going to be kept now, they're promises that are going to be kept in 6 months, in 12 months, in 36 months. It's just very important, and also tools are ripe for this kind of testing, because a lot of it is unit-based. A lot of it is X happens when Y occurs. Also, we use QA testing. It's very good to have a very good communication with your QA teams to make sure that there is always a human between you and your content creators, just to make sure that your content creators are always protected. Also, communication, as I said before, does not stop at the end of planning. One reason for that there is the third kind of testing, stakeholder testing. You want to make sure your tool is broken up into a small chunk as you possibly can, so that way then you can give it out to your stakeholder, to your person that's going to be using that tool. And that's because you want to deliver the right tool first time round. The earlier you can do that, that generally means that you can react to that change. So if they give you feedback, the earlier you can get that feedback back, the earlier you can start to react, or maybe factor that into maybe a polishing step. So this was our tool in the end. It's nothing too complicated, it's just a form inside of our tool set. The artist just selects the area that they want the assets to go. They were actually quite organized where their models were, so their models were just in folders. So it was very easy for us as a software engineer to just look through all of the folders rather, recursively, and select everything that looked like a model and actually place it on the level. Now, something inside of our tool set was a unique ID that persisted between sessions. Now, what this meant was that we could take this unique ID and we could store it in a text file, and now these assets act like a collection. You could reselect it, reselect all the assets, delete them, move them about, and do whatever you want with them. And what this really meant is during the course of Forza Horizon 5, 2,800 assets went through this tool without an engineer having to be involved. This meant that they could just go through this entire process with their leads. And crucially, it meant that this wasn't the amount of assets that were on the level at one time. This was the amount of assets that were placed. Maybe they were moved because they're in the wrong place, deleted, and replaced, all without an engineer being in that mix. So they can make the beautiful game Forza Horizon 5. So let's just briefly review some of the skills that were sort of involved there. Communication, especially in tools, I guess in all AAA, but in tools, communication is key. So a lot of the time in tools, you are taking data from one end and maybe passing it over to someone else. Sometimes in tools, well, a lot of time in tools, you're making user-friendly input. So you've got to make sure you're making the right user-friendly interfaces. I was on a roll here. I can carry on. It's not very user-friendly, is it? mean, to be fair, you can still read it. Thank you. I'll start the slide again. So, communication. A lot of the time on tools, you're taking data from one end, usually from your artists, and passing it over to someone else. You've got to make sure you're taking the right data from your engineers, and, well, from your artists rather, and what you're taking, and maybe you're waiting on them, or you're needing some example data from them, or maybe you're passing over data maybe to systems or to engineering or to the runtime. You've got to make sure there's communication between the two teams. A lot of the time, communication is between different mediums, so sometimes you're communicating by email or through in person or by whatever DMing service. Whatever DM service you end up having, like Teams or Slack, or whatever communication you end up having for documentation, like Confluence or Notion. You've got to get good at this kind of communication constantly to be able to make these kind of plans. It doesn't matter how easy it might seem, you've got to make sure you're delivering the right product every single time. Secondly, testing. So we use test-driven development. It keeps our stability high and our regression low. There's much better talk on testing than this here, that's specifically on it, on how we delivered better testing and stability during Forza Horizon 4 for the Lego DLC and Fortune Island, which is I'll link in the Discord and hopefully in the bottom of the YouTube. QA testing. Have a good relationship with your QA because you want to make sure that they're testing the right things to make sure you have that stability. Stakeholder testing. Deliver the right tool first time. We also do have telemetry in our tools. It sort of gives us a broad picture of something's going wrong. It's not a replacement for delivering the right thing first time though. And finally, act within your strengths. So that unique ID feature that I mentioned before, that was raised at the planning stage. So that means that when you have an idea like that, what you should do is you should raise it. Spec it out, figure out how long it's going to take and how much it might save. The reason being that the worst that can happen is that you spec it out, it's going to take, I don't know, a month, and it's going to save a couple days. That's the worst that can happen. The best that can happen is going to take days, it's going to save months. And it might save months over multiple projects. You might be able to rip that tool out and use it in multiple projects. I don't know what your tool set looks like. The rewards that you can get from tools can be amazing. So just raise it at the planning stage. That is the time to do it. So some people in the room are thinking, that was AAA. You might be a student, you might not be thinking that right now. I don't believe that. I believe that tools are for everyone. Tools are for you. I believe that tools are for the solo developer. I believe tools are for the independent developer because tools make you more productive. And when you're a solo developer, you need that productivity. So as you start making a more complicated game, you start making these more complicated questions, and you start wanting to think about how you might want to author this more complicated data. So if you think about how you might want to, I don't know, author or create a car or put your artistic decisions into how you might want to draw out a road, what you don't want to be doing is editing XML files. Editing files is not the fun part of game development. Games development is. So this here's my second example from independent development. I've been working on a little prototype of the classic game of Snake, popularized by Nokia, for me personally, the Nokia 3410. And in that little prototype I've been just making in Unity, I implemented a border. And what I wanted was the game to find the loops in that border system for the actual user, so the designer didn't have to think about it. And I wanted to use the actual features of Unity, so they could draw out the border and not think about it. But there was a problem. If the gap between the border was only 1 wide, that was an invalid border. And this therefore then meant that the designer didn't necessarily know when he'd drawn an invalid border. So when would I want a designer to know they had drawn an invalid border? Do I want them to test continually? Well, when do I know as a software engineer? I know because I've got my unit tests. I know instantly, pass, fail. I want them to know instantly with some instant visual feedback. And that's where I started. Instant visual feedback. And I drew up a plan, just on paper. Get used to writing up plans on paper. At least at first, if you're independent, I mean. Just in general, get used to writing up plans. Just draw up a bit of code, like I did. I just drew up code and the visuals. The reason we do electronically in AAA is because we want to get our peers involved, because we want the employer to give us the time that we know our plans deserve, and because we want to reduce that risk. But at the very least, if you're a student or if you're learning, get used to getting the ideas on paper. Because my first plan I scribbled up and threw away. So just get used to doing that, basically. Get used to writing up some plans. So I had my plan, and I realized that my visuals could be a tile map. And my border was also a tile map. And this also meant that I could make very easy tests. I could say, given my test tile map, make this test visual. As long as I make enough of those, I know my code worked. And that meant I could keep my code nice and clean. Now, if you take nothing else from today and you want to go build some tools in Unity, go use the UI builder. It's a very easy way of drawing out the different types of like toggles and drop-downs and making them look pretty. It's very similar to something called WPF inside of C#. So, and also that's something that employers will look for if you're going to go for a tools engineering job. I'd also recommend you go use WPF, but it's a nice start in a gaming context. So, this here was my implementation in the end. It's just a layer that you toggle on inside of Unity. So you go to the custom menu section, you toggle on that menu, and then you have a little visual. The green arrows, that's wherever the snake character goes in. The red arrows are wherever the snake character comes back out the other end. You've got a pair of them, you know that border is valid. Now, a lot of this uses Unity inbuilt features. So the custom menu is just an attribute. The actual visual is the same as my border in game and is tagged with editor only. Now, that means that if you export it, it doesn't go with you. It'll never end up in Steam or someone's Xbox. There's also a nice little gist on Google, which someone's remade called editor mode only. That means when you press play, it also doesn't end up on there. That I'll link as well. And if you really don't want to go all the way to UI Builder, you can also have the same attributes on your model behaviors. That I'll talk about in a second. And the graph view, yes. So tech artists in the room, if you really want to go mess around with Unity, you can also mess around with the graph view in Unity. It is a great test bed to make some tools in a gaming context. So, all of that aside, if you are a novice software engineer and you're thinking, that first slide, I'm not on AAA, and maybe that independence work, even though I'm going to give you the code, maybe that might be a bit too much. If you're a novice engineer and you just try the stuff out in game jams and you just open up Unity and that's the only time you ever do it, this is your homework. I want you to consider making some better interfaces for your artists and your designers. If you ever require a rigid body on your model behavior, I want you to add or consider adding require a rigid body on top of your model behavior. It means that when you drag out your model behavior, it will actually add it on there. If you have documentation, add help URL. If you have tooltips, add them in there. Add headers and spaces. If you have text that looks better with multiple lines, add text areas. If you have integers that look better with a slider, add a range on there. Help your designers and your artists create the data that you want them to enter in. Don't expect them to look at this all day. That's the least that you can possibly do for what this here basically is, which is just a couple of steps to make a better interface. And if you do have an operation you want them to run, the same square attributes can be used to make a little drop-down to run your code. So, better tools make better games. So please work more effectively with tools. Thank you very much.
Phenomenal. Thank you, Scott. That's yeah, brilliant. So yeah, it's a short and sweet one tonight. Usually we'd have 2 talks, like I say. So yeah, for the future, if you come along, we will usually have 2 talks. But tonight we've just got Game Devs and Bevs, which used to be a thing we did a little while back that we'll probably be kicking back off now as a result of this. So yeah, we'll meet back downstairs. For anyone who, yeah, we've got it. Yeah, okay. So if you want references and stuff, Scott's been incredibly thorough. And so, can I share this with everyone?
Yeah, they'll be in the Discord.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So yeah, actually that leads on quite nicely to that, which is links to our meetup and our Discord. So again, apologies if you're an artist and you're expecting an artist talk tonight. I did put out things on the meetup and on LinkedIn to say that we weren't going to have it. So yeah, my apologies if you're expecting that. But join the LinkedIn, join the meetup and the Discord. It's just a good place to sort of be together between events and know what's going on. We usually announce things through the meetup. So yeah, there's leaflets around as well. But beyond that, that is it for the night, other than going and having a good time and having a drink together. So thanks all for being here, and I'll speak to you all individually downstairs, hopefully. Cool. Another round of applause for Scott, please, for an awesome talk. Thank you.